mute yourself afterwards. And also, many of you know more about this than I do. So feel free to offer comments and any other observations you have in the chat. And hopefully hearing this story involving some of our congregational members memorabilia will make it more meaningful for you. And hopefully the technology will cooperate. And if not, I'll scream and Michal will help me. So, as you know, Crystal Night of Broken Glass, November 9th through 10th, 1938, a night that changed life forever for the Jews in Germany. But first, let's look at what life was like before that. And we're going to do this in stories of some people you may or may not know. This adorable young man is Peter Letterman, who unfortunately passed away a few months ago. And he grew up in Goethe in central Germany. And then, I unfortunately did not know Lou, but many of you did, Bee and Lou. Bee Bravman grew up in Constance, which is on the Swiss border. And her father was a cantor at their shul. And Lou grew up in Suhl in central Germany, which is about 30 miles from where Peter grew up. Okay, so here's a picture of a German family in the 1920s. And so what can you tell me about them just from the picture? Shout out your answers.
Well, the Lederhosen stands out. They look
very happy.
They look very happy and
Relaxed,
content.
sitting in
Happy
the
and
garden.
content.
They're sitting in the garden. Looks like a fairly well-to-do family, or certainly middle class, and they look very German. So there is nothing here to tell you that in fact they are Jewish, but they are. And Jews in the 20s and the 30s were well integrated and even assimilated into German society, but they still maintain their identity and their culture. And of course, a majority of them were Reform Jews, since that's where Reform Judaism started, and that made it easier for them to go to their Christian friends' houses to eat. They had not the distinguishing clothing, so there were many ways in which that helped in terms of making it easier for them to look like part of the German society. These are Peter Letterman's maternal grandparents. Again, they look very well-to-do, have a nice big house, and his grandfather was in fact a well-known successful surgeon in Germany. Here's a poster we have of some of the synagogues in Germany, some of the many synagogues in Germany. What can you say about them?
They're big, they're fine, they look like lovely buildings. They're not hidden at all. They're look like they're a central part of a town.
Exactly.
Some of them look like they could be churches.
Yes. Some of them look like they could be churches, and they are big and grand. And it's not an accident that some of them look like churches, because many of them were built by church architects. And I'm told that there are even some in which the 10 Commandments, which, as you know, we always have 1 through 5, and then 6 through on the left and 6 through 10 on the right. There are evidently some synagogues where they're reversed because they were built by Christian architects, church architects. So they felt safe practicing their religion. They felt comfortable practicing their religion in the open. And of course, they also observed their traditions at home. This is a holocover from about 1870. So can you see what language besides Hebrew, what language this is written in? Yes, no, this is German.
German, yeah.
German. So this is the Stunden der Andacht, Hours of Devotion. It's a collection of prayers published in 1855. It was written by a Jewish woman, Fanny Neuda, for Jewish women. And this was the first prayer book, such prayer book composed in German rather than Yiddish. This was another way in which German, this is another way in which the German Jews fit in society. While Yiddish was primarily the language in Eastern Europe, many German Jews spoke German, in fact, looked down on Yiddish. This is Louis Frank. This is Lou Mulfelder's uncle. He was a soldier in World War II. He was among the 100,000 Jewish soldiers who fought for Germany. Most of them on the front lines, and 12,000 of them died. And despite that, the Germans blamed the Jews for Germany losing the war, either because they claimed they shirked their duty, which they didn't, or there was a conspiracy theory, good conspiracy theory, that said that there were internal enemies, including Jews, who had betrayed the Germans. And Louis died in the war, and Lou was named after him. So this is a picture of Heidelberg in the 1930s with the castle on the hill. It still is still a castle on the hill. And you'll notice all the swastikas. So the swastika was actually an ancient symbol of good fortune from Eastern culture. It was sometimes called the footsteps of Buddha. And it was a good luck symbol in this country as well, until the Germans appropriated it, rotated at 45 degrees, and then of course it became the symbol of their extreme nationalism. And while today we interpret the swastika as specifically anti-Semitic, the Jews were equal opportunity haters. Germans were equal opportunity haters. They wanted to rid the country not only of Jews, but of Romas, i.e. gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, non-whites, homosexuals, and disabled. So it actually has a much broader connotation of persecution of minorities. This is a rally in Berlin Stadium. I don't know if you can see, but can you see who's in the stands? Or can you tell from the people down in front?
You can see the foreground is kids.
This is all kids. This is a Hitler Youth rally. They had uniforms. It's like being part of the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts. It was part of belonging. I'm assuming there was a lot of peer pressure, so it was very difficult to not belong. Loyalty to Hitler was taught in the schools as well. And if you think about it, we've seen in recent years the power of political rallies to energize people, to encourage loyalty. So you can imagine how effective this was with kids. And as the teacher from Summit High School pointed out, these were the kids that 10 years later were running the concentration camps. So Hitler was appointed chancellor in January of 1933. Did I have that right?
Yep.
Yep, good. I somehow suddenly thought it was 32. 33, thank you. And by April, there were laws passed that forbid the Jews to be lawyers or civil servants, which meant that if you were a university professor at a public university or you were a doctor at a public hospital, you were out of a job. Also restricted Jews' attendance at school to be no more than 5% of the total number of people at the school, regardless of the demographics of the neighborhood. And then in 1935, the Nuremberg laws were passed. Jews could not intermarry or even have sexual relations with anyone with German blood. They were no longer German citizens. They couldn't vote or hold public office. Oops, let's go back there for a moment. So the Jews were suddenly not sort of an undistinguished part, not undistinguished is the wrong word, but unidentified part of the German society. They were suddenly defined as a race, and it was no longer mattered how they defined themselves. And sort of a sad commentary is that these laws and subsequent laws were built based on Germans studying our Jim Crow laws, because they viewed our segregation of a group of people as like the most successful they could find. So what were the Germans trying to do? Well, they were trying to get everybody to leave that they didn't want there. They wanted a pure Aryan nation. So why wouldn't people just pick up and leave after this? Any thoughts?
My grandfather was a judge who, of course, in 1933 was stripped of his job and all of that. And he used to say, I'm a German. I fought for the first World War I.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a German. Why would they do this to me?
Right. Right.
And then he just lay down and had pneumonia, and he lay down and died because he just couldn't take it. He just couldn't accept it.
Wow.
Marcia, some people tried to leave but had nowhere to go.
Exactly. They had no place to go.
Wanting to stay.
They also, I mean, it's not the easiest thing. If you have a business, it's not the easiest thing to say, well, I'll just pick up and move somewhere else. If you got family, that's not easy. All of these, it was not an easy decision. And I think there was also, a lot of denial, like, oh, this is going to get better. This can't last. And as you said, they didn't have any place to go. If you heard Peter Engler's talk a few weeks ago, they ended up at Shanghai because his mother went to the embassy and said, where can I go that I don't need papers? They said, Shanghai, that's where they went. So what else was happening? The first concentration camp was established at Dachau in 1933. It was actually, the concentration camps originally were for political prisoners, not their later use. In May, university students in Berlin burned over 25,000 un-German books, and that was the beginning of an extreme censorship. There was a boycott of Jewish businesses, and the Nazi party and the party in the German state were basically now one. In 1935, as we discussed, the Nuremberg laws were passed. Jews' forbidden signs increased. And in 1938, there was an international conference in Evian, France, to discuss the refugee problem. It was actually called by Roosevelt, and 32 nations attended, plus many relief organizations. And if you read about the arguments against accepting more refugees, they sound a lot like the arguments we're hearing these days about refugees and the current refugee crises in the world. From a report on the conference, it said, each delegate formally expressed sorrow over the growing number of refugees and deportees, boasted of his nation's traditional hospitality, and lamented that his nation was unable to do more in the present situation. Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Honduras, and Panama stated they wanted no traitors or intellectuals, code words for Jews. Argentina said it had already accommodated enough immigrants from Central Europe. Canada cited its unemployment problem. Australia said that it had no racial problems. I don't know what happened to the Aborigines, and they did not want to create any by bringing in Jewish refugees. Imperial countries such as Britain, France, and the Netherlands said that their tropical territories offered only limited prospects for European refugees. And the Americans noted that Congress would have to approve any change in the nation's immigration laws, which set a limit on the number the United States would accept. So of the 32 nations, only the Dominican Republic offered to take in more refugees. And of course, as we know, in the United States, while that was the quote, citing the law as the excuse was an excuse because there was a high unemployment, so they didn't want immigrants to take jobs. There was fear that German Jewish immigrants would be Nazi spies, and of course there was just a basic anti-Semitism going on. Jews were further distinguished by giving middle names of Sarah or Israel, and their passports were marked with the letter J.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
When you say that, that was in Germany, right? About the middle names?
Yes.
That was a German thing, right? Okay.
Yep. Yep. Yes, this is all in Germany. Yep. So here's a poster of Jewish shops being boycotted, with the Yuda and the caricatures drawn on the buildings. These are Peter's parents, Irmgard and Ernst, and these are their passports. And you can see Sarah, and you can't see it very well. I just forgot the middle name was.
Israel.
Israel, there we go. And you can see the J's on their passports. Now, this is somebody else. This is Margot Epstein. This is Anita Liebman's mother. You can see a family resemblance. She lived in, they lived in Bonn. Her mother and her stepfather, who was Polish, her mother was a milliner. They ran a women's hat shop, and they lived upstairs of the shop. So here she is describing some events that happened prior to Kristallnacht.
Okay, my stepfather, being Polish, was awakened at 4 o'clock one morning in 1938. I don't remember the exact date. And he and all the other Polish citizens, the Jewish men, just the men and the boys, were put onto trucks without anything, no toothbrush, no nothing, and pushed across the Polish border. My mother got sick in bed. I just reread that in one of the letters that I had from the lawyer. My mother was sick in bed with kidney stones from all the upset. And one morning, there was a big knock on the door, real loud knock on the door downstairs, and we lived on the first floor, and there was a very dark hallway going up. And so we opened the door from upstairs, and a bunch of SS men were screaming, "Open the door to the store, open the door, open the door." But It's ridiculous. I went downstairs, I opened the door, and I went halfway up the stairs again, and one of the guys came after me. And one of the SS men, who must have been the boss, yelled, "Leave the child alone." I was very small and looked very young, so I looked about 12, 13, and I was, in 38, I was already 16, or 15 3/4, I don't remember exactly. It was ridiculous for them to scream to open the door, because as soon as they got in, they started to smash the windows outside the windows where we had the merchandise, all the glass cases in the house, every machine in the workplace that was behind the store. Downstairs there were machines. They smashed everything. And of course that was the end of our business.
So that brings us to Kristallnacht. On November 7th, 1938, a 17-year-old ethnic Polish Jew named Herschel Greenspan had been living in Paris for several years, in France for several years, and he learned that the Nazis had shipped his family, which had been living in Hanover, Germany for many, many years. They shipped them off to Poland, and he was annoyed. He was angry, and so as a retaliation, he assassinated Ernst von Rath, who was a German diplomat in Paris. And the Nazis immediately seized on that as a way to work up Hitler's followers into an anti-Semitic frenzy. And the following night was a coordinated nationwide night of terror. Synagogues were burned, Jewish homes and shops were vandalized, over 90 people were killed, and 30,000 Jewish men were sent to concentration camps. These dots represent some of the cities where synagogues were destroyed. Kristallnacht. This is the synagogue in Constance, where B's father was the cantor, and then for a short time, the rabbi, after the rabbi fled. It was, the inside of the synagogue was destroyed in 1936. And B tells the story of sitting on the curb watching it burn. People from all over the country contributed to rebuilding the synagogue, but it was destroyed on Kristallnacht, at which point B and her family had already fled Germany. This is Lou's, the synagogue in the town where Lou lived in Sceaux, also burning from Kristallnacht. Of the 30,000 men sent to Buchenwald, 2 were Lou's father and Peter's father. And this is a picture of some of those those men at Buchenwald, and you'll notice they all have their head shaved. And amazingly enough, people were able to identify Lou's father. This is his father at Buchenwald. Why did they take only the men? Any thoughts?
Were they
Use
the
them
ones
for
taking
labor.
money?
To use them for labor, for work.
Yeah, I don't.
Right?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if they were doing that at this point.
I don't believe there was any effective work. They really were trying to get people still to leave. And indeed, you could leave the concentration camp if you could get out of the country in 3 days.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And actually, Peter's father was released not because of his own petition, but because some of his clients, he had become a CPA, and some of his clients were trying to leave, And in order to leave, not only the time frame, you had to demonstrate that you really divested yourself of all your resources, all your income, and they needed the accountants to certify that indeed that was so, or to help them.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that part of the story. I know that he was released.
So he was released, and then he ended up writing letters on behalf of, actually, I guess 1 or 2 of them had been his clients, but it turned out 18 men from the town of Tamar in Turingen were had been interned at Buchenwald, and wrote letters on behalf of their behalf why they should be released. Those letters had been found about a decade ago in the town's records. These were letters written and to the Gestapo, and town got a copy. And we have those letters as that Peter's father Ernst had written on behalf.
Wow. Okay.
A number of them did get out, were able to leave the country and survive.
Okay. Okay. I mean, the other reason is that typically the men were the breadwinners. So if you took the men, the family had less means and was more likely to think about leaving. I think it's another theory. What was the aftermath of Kristallnacht? Well, by law, the Jews were totally purged from the German economy. There was a mass panic as Jews tried to leave, which was pointed out not an easy thing to do. And of course, the ultimate goal of removing all Jews from Germany one way or another began in earnest. And by 1943, 300,000 Jews had fled Germany. 180,000 had been murdered, and Germany declared itself to be free of Jews. So that is the end of the tour. Took much less time than I thought it would. Any questions, any comments? There will be hopefully 3 more of these. One focused on B and Lou, one focused on Peter, and one focused on Jewish Jewish traditions and religion in pre-war Germany. And so Susan, I may be asking you for those papers.
Well, I guess we can make copies of those papers. Yes,
Yeah.
we have copies, obviously.
Okay.
Still in the town of Tamar, but we have copies of the letters. Marcia, excellent job. I mean, my goodness, it's hard to use so effectively the artifacts that we have to tell the story.
Thank you.
It's an important thing. I just think the horror of it is hard to understand sort of in retrospect, because as you said, there were signs from 1933 on that this was the goal, and how come, it seemed like people were just sitting around and waiting for tide to turn. One of the things that made me understand better how German Jews felt about this was to read the diaries of Victor Klemperer. Victor Klemperer was a cousin of Otto Klemperer, whose name you might know because he was a well-known conductor. But Victor had been the son of a Reform rabbi in Germany, but he himself was an atheist. He married someone who was not Jewish, and he was a professor of philosophy, I think, at a Dresden university. And he too, he fought in World War I. He thought he was immune from any of this, and he considered himself German. And these interlopers who really didn't represent the ideals of Goethe and Schiller and all the aspects of Germany that defined culture, they would eventually disappear. That we can just manage to ride this out. That was his thinking originally. And he eventually obviously had many more difficulties. He did manage to survive, and it's extraordinary reading if you're interested in this.
I'll look for that.
A little lighter note, anybody who liked Hogan's Heroes, Warner Klemperer was the son of Otto. So that's, I guess, his way of getting back. But on a more serious note, Marcia, I'm so grateful for all of your efforts, everybody on the Temple Emanu-El Holocaust Remembrance Center. Before COVID hit, just to remind folks, Marcia was doing even more work welcoming students. I think, Marcia, we had a total of 60 students? Is that about right?
That's about, we had a group from Chatham, a group from Summit, and we had some from the Temple Religious School as well.
And so we were making our outreach to secular institutions and starting to bring them in, which was a key part of our strategy. And I do look forward to that coming back up once we reopen. So it's just wonderful. And I thank you all for all of your work and support. Whoever was really all involved, it really wasn't me other than promoting it. And so it's wonderful to see you all. And Marcia, again, massive amount of work. So grateful for everything that you do for this important piece of Sinai.
Thanks. Well, it is.
Marcia, you said you're doing 2 more. Do you have the dates?
And I know, and I didn't say I'm doing 2. We have to put together some more.
Oh.
No, what we need to do now is to discuss how to make the existence of this tour known to local schools, because, logistically, it's much easier for them to attend, an hour Zoom meeting than to, do the bus and the whole other thing. It's not quite as effective. For those of you who, the actual tour that we gave involved a series of posters, some of which you saw, the actual artifacts and the to check Torah scrolls. And the other thing we did that
Hi, this is B.
Yes.
I want you to know how grateful I am for keeping our museum alive and being used. I look forward to all the items going back into the center and kids to come and learn. And I am so grateful that all of this was made possible. And I know Lou would be absolutely delighted that the work continues. So thank you to everyone who's been involved.
And this is Leslie, B's daughter.
Hi,
You're
Leslie.
visiting. Hi, everyone. And
Hi.
I just
Hi.
say, for the next generation, it's so important to us, so appreciated that you're doing this work to keep the memory alive, to zachor, to remember. And we're very grateful for that. I know my parents are. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. There was something I was going to say, which of course I forgot. So we're going to be looking for ways to reach out to schools to make this known, and because I think it's less of a big deal for them to do this than to physically come. One thing we did that I think might have been Rabbi Gershon's idea, I'm not sure, was that when people came on the tour, we gave them a small river stone to hold on to. And at the end, when they left the Holocaust Center, we had a candle and they put the stone there. And we explained the tradition of leaving stones as a symbol of memory at cemeteries. And I always thought that was very moving, which unfortunately we can't do here. But
we can actually have a picture of the candle and the stones, and that might be a nice
that is a nice
final
thing.
slide.
That's an excellent idea. We could do that. That's a great idea.
Marcia, what is the minimum age group of kids or grade that kids come to the center?
I think we decided middle school.
Okay, okay.
Uh,
Yeah, it's interesting. We through the whole off-site situation of Zoom, I think we've learned where there are benefits to having this medium, and we have to sort of sort out, are there some beyond just the convenience, and it does spread the access in many ways. And I'm even thinking about the small groups that came, that sometimes it's hard for them to identify with the pictures and as well as when they and sort of the interactive aspect, which we had hoped to build in any case to our, to the can be an important part of a visit, or that we combine both the physical visit, if once we get to that point again, as well as some things, some talks like of survivors and pictures up close, and anyhow, we can rethink also how we best present.
Right. Right. And for those of you who don't know, Sue has come and talked to a couple of our different groups, and the class at Summit actually has adopted a survivor, and she came and spoke as well at one point. And it's been suggested that we might want to, on the various well, okay, Amanda, I'll call you up. Amanda Greenblatt asked if we would like to promote this to the community at large, and she had some ideas of Facebook pages where we could advertise it, if that's something we would like to do.
Well, I think you did such a beautiful job, Marcia, truly.
Thank
And
you.
I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to share. And I think adults would be interested. I actually, at 1 o'clock with Federation, I'm doing something at this trip, part of a 3-week virtual trip to Israel. And I think this is just another opportunity. I mean, you could do this with Federation, and, I don't know how difficult the logistics are behind it and getting it set up, but you did such a beautiful job. You could run this exact program, and I mean, people would really value it.
Thanks. Well, now that we've got the PowerPoint, and hopefully have beaten the technical issues into submission, it's not, and then I have other docents who are willing to give the tour as well. So, that's certainly, it's not as big a deal to do anymore. So if you have thoughts on how to, how to proceed with that, we can certainly discuss it.
Sure.
Well, I thank you all for coming, for being interested.
Thank you,
And
Marcia,
you're welcome.
very much.
I'm glad
Thank you,
to have been
Marcia.
able to
Wonderful
do this.
seeing everybody.
Yep. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Marcia.
Yeah. Bye.